Hey everyone, this is Kono once again, back with another video for Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In today's video, it's all about collaborations with Monster Hunter World Iceborne, more specifically, what games I would love to see do a collaboration with Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Monster Hunter World Iceborne has done an amazing job when it comes to collaborations. However, for the most part, when it comes to collaborations, what we usually see when it comes to collaboration in Monster Hunter World Iceborne is that we see aesthetics from different games be brought into Monster Hunter World Iceborne, as well as certain weapon sets. Now, when it comes to collaboration in Monster Hunter World Iceborne and Monster Hunter World, the base game itself, this did evolve into a certain degree. When it came into Monster Hunter World Iceborne, we started to see certain mechanics from the different games that Capcom did collaborations with be brought up into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, when it comes to the base game itself, this took on the next step in that Capcom themselves actually brought in some of the monsters and creatures from the games that they collaborated with into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. This is most prominent when it came to the Behemoth from Final Fantasy XIV and of course the Leshen and Ancient Leshen from the Witcher series. Now in this video, we're going to be talking about collaborations where it brings in monsters from these different games into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So the choices that I've made when it comes to my personal picks of potential games that could do collaborations with Monster Hunter World Iceborne, I picked them solely because of the fact that I think that some of the creatures from these video games could actually be something that we could see in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So this is all about the full package of bringing in creatures into Monster Hunter World Iceborne as potential collaborations. Now let's go ahead and get started on some of the games that I would love to see do a collaboration with Monster Hunter World Iceborne due to the fact that they have amazing creatures that I think would fit in very well in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now then, right off the bat, the first one we are gonna go with is none other than Bandai Namco's Dark Souls series, more specifically, Dark Souls 3. Now the Dark Souls 3 game actually has one creature that a lot of people think would fit in very well in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. If you're a fan of Dark Souls and the Monster Hunter series, this creature should be somewhat familiar to you, and you may also think that this creature would fit in very well in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, especially within the Rotten Vale area. And that is none other than Dark Souls 3's Dark Eater Meteor. Now when it comes to Dark Eater Meteor is actually like the perfect creature in my personal opinion to be brought in to Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And the reason for this is because of the fact that when it comes to Meteor itself, Meteor actually has the perfect size and silhouette that matches some of the monsters in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, more specifically Shara Ishvalda, Xeno'jiiva, and Safi'jiiva. So Dark Eater Meteor itself actually looks like an Elder Dragon around the same size as these three monsters, and I think if Capcom themselves actually brought in Meteor into Monster Hunter World Iceborne, they can do a secluded area that's based around the Rotten Vale, and I think that would be a very perfect area for Dark Eater Meteor to be actually in and be fought at. Now when it comes to the Dark Souls series, we all see it as a very gothic, a very dark, even sometimes horror-based kind of game. And when it comes to bringing in creatures from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into the Dark Souls series, I think the best fit for this particular game is none other than the Valhazak itself. Now, when it comes to the Valhazak armor set as well, both armor sets for the Valhazak and the Black Veil Valhazak fit in the theme of the Dark Souls game extremely well. So I think that if Capcom ever do a swap of monsters between these two games, so let's say Monster Hunter World Iceborne gets Dark Eater Meteor and Dark Souls gets Black Veil Valhazak, I think that would be a perfect match between these two games, like we've seen with the Rathalos as well as the Behemoth in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, the second game that I'm thinking of is actually a very old game that recently got a 2018 remake, and this is none other than Shadow of the Colossus. Now, some people might think, why would I pick Shadow of the Colossus? And this is actually because of the fact that when it comes to the Colossi themselves, the overall aesthetics of the Colossi are very unique, but at the same time, they feel like something that you would see in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, because of the fact that we have something like Zora Magdaros, which is basically like a colossal creature, I think there is a certain limit as to what kind of sizes Capcom can do when it comes to bringing in these Colossi into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And honestly, I would love to see a Colossi in Monster Hunter World Iceborne simply because of the fact that both of these games actually do deal with colossal sized monsters. Colossus more so than Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, when it comes to bringing in a monster from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into Shadow of the Colossus, then we already have Zora Magdaros, as I previously stated. One of the great things about Zora Magdaros and the Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus is that the combat mechanics are somewhat similar. We climb onto the monster, we try to locate their weak points, in this case scenario of the Zora Magdaros, it's the magma cores. We hit them until they break and we deal significant amount of damages to the monster and the Colossi themselves. So in that kind of aspect, both the Zora Magdaros and the Colossi themselves do actually have that same concept of how you actually fight them. So I personally think this would be a great kind of collaboration between Shadow of the Colossus and Monster Hunter World Iceborne. If Capcom themselves can bring in some Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus, they can pick whichever one into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And when it comes to Shadow of the Colossus taking in Zora Magdaros into Shadow of the Colossus, that would be an awesome collaboration in my personal opinion. And I would definitely love to see something like that happen if at any point Capcom considers doing a collaboration with Shadow of the Colossus. The next game series that I think could do a potential collaboration with Monster Hunter World Iceborne is another Bandai Namco series which is underrated in the West, which is none other than the God Eater series. Now, the God Eater series is heavily underrated in the West because the Bandai Namco social media websites and social media pages, they just don't do anything in terms of promoting the God Eater series in the West. And to be quite honest, it's a little bit disappointing. Having said that, the God Eater series is an awesome series, and honestly, this is one of those games that's somewhat similar to Monster Hunter World Iceborne, but takes its own twist in making it very anime-like in comparison to the more realistic feel of combat in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, when it comes to the origami, there's a huge list of origamis that I can pick from when it comes to the God Eater series to be put into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So rather than picking from a huge list of origami, I decided to just chop it all down into picking the flagship origami of the God Eater series that I can personally think would fit well into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, there's 4 origami that I personally think would fit in very well in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and all 4 of these origami are actually flagship origami in the God Eater series. You have Diospita, Vajra, you have Anubis, and my favorite, you have Hannibal as well. Now, personally for me, I think Hannibal is the best choice, but of course you also have Anubis, Vajra, and Diospita that could fit in very well in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, when it comes to the reverse of bringing in a monster from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into the God Eater series, I think Ruiner Nergigante is the best fit for that, simply because of the fact that Ruiner Nergigante kind of fits the theme of God Eater itself in terms of how the monsters look. They have very dark colorations all over their body, and they're very metallic because some of these creatures actually adapt very inorganic matter to them. And honestly, Ruiner Nergigante's metallic spikes feel very inorganic in comparison to some of the monsters in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So I personally think it would fit in very well in the God Eater series. Now, the next game that I'm thinking of that could potentially do a collaboration with Monster Hunter World Iceborne is a game that hasn't even been released yet. This is a game that was on my list of 7 anticipated games of 2020, but it doesn't even have a proper release date as of yet, and this is none other than Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Now, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink looks really awesome from the stuff I've seen when it comes to the demo and the cutscenes and the trailers. And honestly, when it came to the demo, they showed us a boss, which is a dragon, and that dragon looks like it could really fit into Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now, they will need to tweak some of the graphics to make it a little bit more realistic due to the realistic design of the graphics in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, but I think these two games would do really awesome in a collaboration. Now, when it comes to bringing in any creatures from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I think anything goes as well. just because of the fact that when it comes to Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, there's loads of fantasy creatures that we can see with this particular game, and honestly, I'm not quite sure what kind of narrative they're going with and what kind of focus they're looking into when it comes to the creatures of Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. I'm personally not a huge kind of person when it comes to the Grand Blue Fantasy series because I've never actually played it, but I'm really hoping that Grand Blue Fantasy Relink kind of introduces me really well into this series, and I'm really hoping that this is the game that gets me really hooked up in Grand Blue Fantasy. So this is a game that I'm looking forward to because it does look amazing. So again, when it comes to creatures from Monster Hunter World Iceborne going into Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, it's an anything goes kind of situation because I don't know what kind of creatures to expect from Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Once we see more of the creatures from this particular game and we have an idea as to what kind of focus they have in terms of creatures, monsters, or anything like that, then I might have a more concise answer as to what creature I would love to see from Monster Hunter World Iceborne be collaborated into Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Now there is one more game on this list that I was a little bit hesitant to add simply because of the fact that it's an MMORPG, and if you're a console player, then this game you might not know very well, and this game is none other than Guild Wars 2. Now Guild Wars 2 and Monster Hunter World Iceborne both deal with the concepts of Elder Dragons and Elder Dragons absorbing energy. When it comes to Monster Hunter World Iceborne, it's Elder Dragons absorbing bioenergy. However, when it comes to Guild Wars 2, it's Elder Dragons absorbing magic. Now, the other difference between these two games is the scale of these Elder Dragons absorbing energy. When it comes to Monster Hunter World Iceborne, then you normally see Elder Dragons which are basically large in size but not colossal in scale to the point that they can basically cover an entire continent. However, when it comes to Guild Wars 2, this is the complete opposite. Elder Dragons in Guild Wars 2 are gigantic to the point that they could probably wipe out an entire continent in one fell swoop. Now, when it comes to these two games dealing with Elder Dragons, I think this is a great way for Capcom to do a collaboration with ArenaNet in order to basically add in Elder Dragons or even just champions of the Elder Dragons from Guild Wars 2 into Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and of course, Capcom themselves bringing in their own Elder Dragons into Guild Wars 2. From my personal perspective, the best choice for me when it comes to Guild Wars 2 creatures in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, I have to pick the Shatterer. The Shatterer is just an amazing looking creature. It's made of pure energy and metal, and for the most part, I think it's an amazing looking creature. Capcom might need to resize it down in order to make sure it actually looks like it could exist in Monster Hunter World Iceborne because of the sheer scale of this creature. However, if they can do that, that would be really awesome. Now, when it comes to bringing in Elder Dragons from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into Guild Wars 2, I can pick whichever Elder Dragon that I want. However, if we're going by the theme of Ice, which is the one that both Iceborne and Guild Wars 2 are dealing with right now with Iceborne and the Icebrood Saga, then I would definitely pick Velkhana. Velkhana could be a champion of one of the Elder Dragons in Guild Wars 2, which is Jormag, and I personally think that this would be a great fit when it comes to Guild Wars 2's current theme of the Icebrood Saga with Jormag itself. So honestly, these two games, I would love to see them do a collaboration. Now that is pretty much it for this video. Now you may have noticed that a lot of the collaboration monsters that I'm thinking of that could transfer from Monster Hunter World Iceborne into these games were focused on Elder Dragons, and the main reason for that is because Monster Hunter World just focuses a lot on Elder Dragons, and Iceborne is no different. So I do apologize if you were expecting something along the lines of a potential suggestion like Nargacuga and God Eater or something like that. That would be really awesome, to be quite honest. But yeah, I was just focusing mostly on the theme of Elder Dragons because that's kind of the main focus when it comes to Monster Hunter World. Having said that though, what do you think are great creatures that we would love to see be collaborated by Monster Hunter World Iceborne within these games? And what other games do you think would be really awesome to do a collaboration with Monster Hunter World Iceborne? What creatures could they bring into Monster Hunter World Iceborne that we could actually fight if they potentially do a collaboration with Capcom for Monster Hunter World Iceborne? That is pretty much it for me for this video. If you enjoyed these videos, please feel free to leave a like on the video itself, as well as subscribe to the channel so you can go ahead and catch up on any future Monster Hunter content that I might be doing or any other games that I might be playing in future. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Onward and upward.